What if your favorite place was hiding a secret that could kill you? That was the question that slammed into Jessica Miller's chest the moment she saw the yellow caution tape fluttering outside the diner spot, a once beloved restaurant she had praised to thousands of followers just 2 years ago. She stood across the street, gripping her paper coffee cup so tightly it crinkled, unable to tear her eyes away from the coroner's van idling beside the curb. Los Angeles traffic roared behind her, indifferent, but Jessica felt as if time had paused in this one moment of confrontation between her past and her present. She hadn't been back here since her influencer days ended in a swirl of disgrace and silence. Yet here it was, the glossy windows, the teal signage she once called retro chic, the same chipped picnic tables she had once photographed pancakes on with perfectly faked sunlight, and now, it was a crime scene. She knew what had happened before anyone said a word. Something had gone wrong with the food. Someone had died. Her gut twisted. A woman in a navy uniform stepped outside, speaking into her radio. Jessica heard just enough to catch the word, contaminated. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, she didn't mean to care, but she couldn't walk away. Then a voice beside her said, "You reviewed that place, didn't you?" She turned sharply. A man, maybe early 40s, stood watching the scene too. Scruffy beard, Dodgers cap, carrying a bag of groceries that looked untouched. He didn't look like a fan or a cop. Just curious. "Yeah," Jessica said, guarded. "A long time ago." He gave a small, knowing nod. "You might want to check out a few others. This isn't the only one." She narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. No name, no preamble, just a list of 5 restaurant names scribbled in pen. Cora's Table, The Crimson Room, Bay Salt, Maison Fleurs, and Hollow Fork. Beneath them, a single sentence, "Don't eat food in these 5 restaurants. Here's why." When she looked up, the man was already halfway down the block, disappearing into the crowd. "Wait," she called, but her voice vanished in the noise of traffic and city life. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jessica stared at the paper again. The names were familiar in a half-remembered way. She'd seen them on her feed, tagged by influencers, raved about by PR accounts. But something about them now felt cold. Dangerous. Wrong. She turned the paper over, blank. No contact info, no reason to believe anything it said. And yet, she couldn't throw it away. Not after what she had just seen. That night, in her apartment, a one-bedroom in Culver City with more empty takeout boxes than furniture, she pulled out her laptop and started digging. The first name, Cora's Table in Denver, was a farm-to-table hotspot with clean branding, minimalist plating, and suspiciously vague press coverage. The second, The Crimson Room, was fine dining with celebrity regulars and not a single negative review on Yelp. Too perfect. She leaned back, her mind flickering to the woman who had died this morning. The police hadn't released her name yet, but Jessica already felt connected to her. Guilty, even. Once upon a time, she might have posted that the eggs Benedict at the diner spot were to die for. The irony made her stomach turn. She opened a new document and wrote the title without thinking, "Don't eat food in these 5 restaurants, here's why." She didn't know if it was an article, a warning, or the beginning of a confession. Her old blog hadn't seen activity in over a year, and when she pulled it up, a dead link reminded her that she'd let the domain expire. After the fallout with Eli, after the photos leaked and sponsors dropped her overnight, she had wanted it all to vanish. The curated life. The fake perfection. The reviews she didn't mean. And yet, here she was again, pulled back into the world of food not by brand deals or curated plates, but by something far more dangerous. The next morning, she took the bus downtown to visit a former contact, a health department clerk named Nina who used to tip her off about inspections back when Jessica Eats was still a name people recognized. Nina met her in a tiny Thai cafe that smelled of lime and chili, her badge still pinned awkwardly to her polo shirt. "I thought you disappeared," she said, sipping iced tea. "Not quite," Jessica replied. "I need a favor." She slid the list across the table. Nina read it silently, her brows slowly rising. "You got this from where?" "A guy. Outside the diner spot. He knew who I was. He said this wasn't the only one." Nina exhaled sharply. "I can't give you inspection reports directly. But I can point you to the public logs. Some of these names, yeah, they've had complaints. Some serious. But they always pass follow-ups. Probably have someone inside." Jessica nodded, already pulling up the websites. She barely noticed when her pad thai arrived. Her appetite had vanished anyway. By the time she got back home, she had a folder full of inconsistencies, inspection results that changed overnight, rebranded management names, silent ownerships. It was like pulling threads from a spider's web, delicate, sticky, interconnected. The deeper she went, the worse it got. Her apartment grew darker as the sun set, but she didn't turn the lights on. Only her laptop screen glowed. She found a comment thread buried in an old Reddit post about food poisoning clusters, one that mentioned bay salt. "Something's off about their oysters. I saw a guy go into shock at the bar." No one said anything. Another listed maison fleurs in connection with labor violations, the kind that never made headlines but scarred lives forever. Jessica's fingers trembled. She had built a career on recommendations. Taste. Aesthetic. Now, she felt like a reverse influencer, uncovering instead of promoting, warning instead of encouraging. She clicked open a blank video editing file, stared into her webcam, and pressed record. "What if your favorite place was hiding a secret that could kill you?" she said, her voice low, tight. "My name is Jessica Miller. I used to tell you where to eat. Now I need to tell you where not to." She uploaded it to her dormant YouTube channel, changed the channel name to The Truth Served Raw, and hit publish. She didn't expect much. Maybe a few old subscribers would click out of curiosity. Maybe someone would ignore it. But the next morning, the video had 12,000 views. Comments poured in. Some angry. Some grateful. Some scared. One, anonymous, simply read, "You're not the only one watching. Be careful." Jessica stared at the screen, heart pounding. She wasn't doing this for views. Not anymore. She needed answers. She needed redemption. And maybe, just maybe, she needed to find the person who handed her that list again. Because someone out there wanted her to know the truth. And someone else wanted her to stay quiet. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Before the headlines, before the scandal, before she became the woman whispering warnings about poison plates, Jessica Miller was a queen of taste. Not in the way Michelin critics held dominion over white linen restaurants, but in the glossy, filtered, fast-paced world of digital food fame. Her rise had been accidental and meteoric. It started in a moment of heartbreak, 3 years ago, when she sat sobbing over a slice of red velvet cake in a tiny bakery in Pasadena. Her boyfriend of 5 years had just ended things with a 2-sentence text and a shrug about needing freedom, and Jessica, mascara smudged and barely functional, had snapped a photo of the cake and posted it with the caption, "Sweet things never leave you." It was liked 400 times in the first hour. The comments rolled in like waves, "Girl, same, that cake is life, drop the location please." Something about the intimacy, the realness, the sadness paired with sugar, it resonated. And for the first time in a long while, Jessica didn't feel invisible. So she posted again the next day. A croissant at a corner cafe with a caption about rebuilding from crumbs. A latte with the words, "Stay soft," written in foam art. Before she knew it, the followers doubled, then tripled. She picked up a used DSLR, learned lighting tricks from YouTube, and studied hashtags like they were sacred scripture. Within 6 months, Jessica Eats became a name. Brands reached out. PR packages arrived at her door. Restaurant openings invited her first, often with free meals and handwritten thank you cards. She was 29, single, adored, and living in Los Angeles with her life curated in beautiful squares of food and feelings. But there was a hunger behind the lens that never really left. It wasn't about food, not really. Jessica had grown up in a house where meals were either skipped or microwaved. Her mother, once a vibrant artist, had passed when Jessica was 13, slowly eaten away by ovarian cancer. Her father had crumbled after the funeral, numbing himself with cheap beer and silence. Dinner, if it happened at all, was a solitary activity. Jessica remembered eating cold beans out of the can, watching reruns on a tiny kitchen TV. The only love she found on a plate came from memories her mother had created, an orange peel cake on birthdays, handwritten recipes tucked in the back of sketchbooks, the scent of cloves and cinnamon in December. That was what food meant to her. Warmth. Presence. Safety. So when people adored her feed, she believed they adored that feeling too. But online affection was fickle. And behind the likes came pressure. To be thinner. To look perfect. To match the very food she photographed. So she began to restrict, first little things, skipping breakfast, cutting dinner. Then it became obsessive. A dance of control. She'd spend hours styling a meal for photos, only to throw it away after a single bite. Her followers never knew. She posted grinning selfies with burgers she didn't touch, desserts she flushed down the sink, pasta she chewed and spit out off camera. It was all part of the brand. Until Eli. He was the kind of man who could make a plate of roasted carrots sound like a revolution. A rising star in the LA culinary world, he was brash, confident, and relentless. They met at a tasting event. He served her a seared scallop with something foamy and green, and she gave it a glowing review. He slid into her DMs an hour later. They went out that night. Within a week, they were inseparable. On camera, they were LA's golden food couple. Off camera, things were murkier. Eli had secrets. He drank too much, snapped too easily, and carried a dark streak of control that flared up when the cameras were gone. Jessica ignored the red flags. She wanted the fantasy. The joint projects, the shared fame, the brunches that doubled as business meetings. But the cracks widened fast. He mocked her food choices. "You photograph food you're afraid to eat," he once said, watching her pick at a risotto. "You're a fraud with a filter." She didn't argue. Because in some ways, he was right. Her smile had started to feel like a costume. The joy she once felt walking into a new cafe had been replaced by dread, by the sinking knowledge that she would have to pose, perform, and produce. Then came the cookbook deal. They were going to co-write it, Jessica and Eli, from farm to feed. It was supposed to be a love letter to flavor, comfort, and togetherness. But one night, while scrolling through emails, she saw her name missing from the contract. Eli had sold the concept solo. Her photos. Her branding. Her platform. All without her consent. She confronted him in his kitchen. He shrugged and told her it was just business. "You're good at looking pretty next to a plate, Jess. That's not authorship." She left that night and never returned. Her reputation took the hit. Eli's team leaked stories that she'd become unstable, unreliable, difficult. Sponsors vanished overnight. A tabloid posted an unflattering photo of her crying into her hands at a taco truck, calling her "Instastarlet crashes and burns." She deleted the app the next day. Jessica spent the next year working at a bookstore in the valley, living off what savings she hadn't burned through, licking her wounds in private. Food became something she avoided altogether. The love she once had for it soured into anxiety. She saw calories instead of comfort. Shame instead of flavor. Yet some nights, she'd walk past the old places, the sushi bar where she and Eli laughed too loud, the pancake shop where she shot her first viral reel, and ache. Not for him. Not even for fame. But for purpose. For that first feeling. That maybe something she created mattered. That someone, somewhere, felt less alone because of what she posted. That's why the list hit her so hard. That's why the death at the diner spot felt like a personal failure. She had told people to go there. She had praised their French toast and cappuccinos and ambience. And now someone had died in the same spot she once called a hidden gem with soul. The morning after she posted the video, she walked through her old neighborhood, past bakeries and bistros that once felt like home. People no longer recognized her. Her face had disappeared from their feeds. She was just another woman in sunglasses, sipping coffee too slowly, watching a world she used to dominate move on without her. She stopped at a food truck she used to love, one that sold vegan barbecue and kale slaw. The line was long, the smells nostalgic. But she didn't order anything. Instead, she took out her notebook and wrote 2 words, Cora's table. If the man at the scene had known who she was, if he had picked her on purpose, then maybe there was a reason. Maybe she could still do something good with what was left of her voice. She couldn't fix the past, but maybe she could warn the present. Her fingers hovered over her phone as she reopened her dormant blog, now hosted under a free domain. She renamed it Served Raw and uploaded her first post in over a year. Just the list, nothing more. 5 names. 5 cities. No explanations. The comments rolled in faster than she expected. People asking questions. Some accusing her of fear-mongering. Others sharing their own strange experiences. My sister got sick after eating at Maison Fleurs, one wrote. She didn't report it because she thought it was her fault. Another, I used to work at Bay Salt. You don't even know the half of it. Jessica's heart raced. It wasn't just a list anymore. It was a map. A direction. A beginning. She pulled out her suitcase from under the bed and opened it. It still smelled faintly of hotel soaps and long-forgotten flight tags. Denver would be first. Cora's table. She hadn't traveled in months, hadn't felt brave in longer. But something told her the answers wouldn't come to her. She had to go find them. As she packed, she slipped her mother's old recipe card into her coat pocket, the one for orange peel cake. A reminder of why she started loving food in the first place. Not for likes. Not for sponsorships. But for stories. For people. For truth. She zipped the suitcase shut, pulled up a map, and booked a one-way ticket to Denver. Something was waiting for her there. Something dangerous. And for the first time in a long while, Jessica Miller wasn't afraid to find it. The train to Denver pulled out of Union Station just past dawn, the sky still smeared in pale streaks of lavender and orange as the city slipped behind her like a memory she didn't ask for. Jessica sat by the window in an aging Amtrak seat, legs curled beneath her, earbuds playing soft instrumental music she didn't really hear, fingers tracing the edges of the folded note that had appended her quiet exile. 5 names. 5 restaurants. No explanation. Just that chilling final line, don't eat food in these 5 restaurants. Here's why. She didn't know why she hadn't flown, maybe it was about time, or space, or fear of moving too fast, but something about the long train ride felt right, like it was giving her room to process what she was really doing. This wasn't a blog tour, or a nostalgic attempt to get her old career back. This was dangerous. Someone had died. Possibly more. And somewhere in the middle of it was a list with her name all over it, even if it hadn't been written on the paper. The more she thought about it, the more certain she was, the man who gave her the list had known who she was. Not just recognized her face, but understood the weight she used to carry when she said, "Eat here." That was the trap of influence, people trusted you. And now, if there was even a chance that something she once promoted was part of a pattern, she had to follow the thread. She unzipped her backpack and pulled out a crumpled notebook, where she had started logging everything she could find on the restaurants. Each had its own tab, and beneath the surface-level info, menus, reviews, owner bios, she scribbled anything that felt strange. For Cora's table, the first stop, she had underlined the same phrase twice, "No documented health inspection since 2022. That couldn't be right. In a city like Denver, inspections were required annually. Either the records were buried, or someone had made sure they weren't public. She glanced at her watch, 12 more hours to go. Enough time to dig deeper. She tethered her phone to her laptop, a worn old MacBook with stickers peeling at the corners, and began combing forums and subreddits. Somewhere in the sea of praise and food photos, she found a post buried 6 months deep in a local Denver thread. "Anyone else get sick after eating the lamb at Cora's? I was out for a week. Could have sworn it was food poisoning but couldn't prove it." No replies. No upvotes. Like it had been ignored, or buried. She clicked into the user profile. Blank. Deleted. Then she checked the restaurant's Yelp page again, scrolling past glowing reviews and influencer shoutouts until she found one from a woman named Tasha. "My boyfriend got violently ill the night we dined here." The staff were dismissive. Never going back. It had a single like. Jessica screenshotted it. Then another. And another. All with the same pattern, some praise, some posts tagged #sponsored, and beneath them, scattered like confetti someone didn't clean up well, were faint warnings that something wasn't quite right. It was as if the truth had been spoken in whispers while the loudspeakers blasted curated perfection. She knew that game. She'd played it. Now she would tear it down. The train rocked gently beneath her. Outside, the California desert gave way to arid cliffs and dry canyons, a rawness that mirrored the feeling in her chest. She remembered a time when a train ride like this would have made her giddy: new city, new food, new content. But now there was no excitement. Only dread. Still, there was clarity in it. Purpose. Something she hadn't felt since before Eli. She pulled up the document where she'd begun drafting her first real piece in over a year. No filters, no brand alignment. Just facts. Title: The List, 5 Restaurants You Should Avoid, and What They're Hiding. Beneath it, she had written only one sentence so far: "This isn't about preference or taste, it's about survival." A knock on her tray startled her. A train attendant smiled. "Meal voucher, miss?" Jessica blinked. "Oh, no thanks." The smell of reheated eggs drifted from the next cart. Her stomach turned. She hadn't eaten since early that morning, just coffee and a protein bar, but the idea of food right now felt foreign. Like it belonged in a different life. She looked back at the list. The second name, the Crimson Room, sat like a bruise on the page. She had heard of it before, everyone had. It was a restaurant/cocktail lounge hybrid in downtown Chicago that catered to celebrities, politicians, and tech billionaires. She remembered seeing it on an influencer story once: dim red lighting, velvet curtains, cocktails with names like Forbidden Whisper and Billionaires Old Fashioned. The same influencer had disappeared from social media 3 months later, her last post ominously captioned, "Never again." Jessica dug until she found the original post. The restaurant tagged. Smiling selfies. Fancy drinks. And the comments, hundreds of them, asking why she vanished. Jessica clicked through replies, finding one that read, "She got sick. Real sick. Asked too many questions. But the account that posted it was gone now. Deleted. She wrote it down anyway. Every scrap mattered. Every missing person or closed account felt less like coincidence and more like design. By the time the train pulled into Denver, it was almost midnight. The air was sharp and cold, the kind that bit through her coat and stung her nose. She checked into a cheap motel just off Colfax Avenue, the kind with a humming soda machine in the lobby and a front desk clerk who didn't look up once from his screen. She bolted the door, placed a chair beneath the handle, habit, and collapsed onto the stiff mattress without bothering to unpack. Sleep didn't come. Her mind wouldn't let her. She kept replaying the scene at the diner spot, the woman's body being wheeled out, the man with the note vanishing into the crowd. What was his motive? Why give her the list? And what did he know that she didn't? The next morning, she dressed in jeans and a thick flannel, pinned her press badge from her old blogging days to her backpack, and made her way to Cora's table. It was nestled in a gentrified strip of downtown Denver, brick-lined sidewalks, manicured trees, bike racks, and a pastel-painted mural of vegetables dancing across the wall. From the outside, it looked beautiful. Inviting. Trendy. Inside, it was calm, almost too quiet for a Saturday morning. The hostess, a young woman with a nose ring and tablet, offered a bright but distracted smile. Table for one. Jessica nodded, glancing around. Open kitchen. Clean countertops. Local art on the walls. It was exactly what she would have gushed about in her old posts. She took a seat by the window and ordered coffee, then asked if the manager was available. "I'm a writer," she said casually. "Doing a piece on sustainable dining." It wasn't a total lie. The manager, a man in his late 50s with close-cropped hair and a well-practiced smile, came over 10 minutes later. "Happy to help," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "We take our sourcing seriously. We've been farm-to-table since 2016. Jessica nodded. "That's great. Would you mind sharing your supplier list?" His smile thinned. "That's proprietary. But we can say we work with local farms." She smiled back, matching his tone. "Even for the lamb?" He blinked. "Of course." She pulled out her notebook. "That's odd. I came across a post from someone who said they got violently ill after eating it here. Said the meat was off. Do you remember anything like that?" His eyes flickered, just for a moment. People get sick for all kinds of reasons. Maybe they drank too much. Maybe they had a bug. We have a spotless record. I couldn't find your inspection report for the last 2 years. They're public. Not yours. A beat. Then the smile returned, colder. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave, Miss Miller." She hadn't told him her name. Her heart skipped. "Excuse me. We don't welcome disruptive guests. I'm just asking questions. And I'm telling you, you're not welcome here." She stood slowly. "What are you hiding?" "Goodbye, Miss Miller." She walked out, pulse racing. Outside, she crossed the street and ducked behind a parked SUV, watching as the manager pulled out his phone and spoke into it, looking nervously around. Not at customers. But at the street. At her. She stepped back. Something was very wrong here. And now, they knew she was asking questions. She looked down at the folded list in her hand, gripped tighter than ever before. 1 restaurant down. 4 to go. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a cover-up. And she was just getting started. Jessica stood at the edge of an alley beside a juice bar, her breath coming fast and sharp in the crisp Denver morning, her heart punching against her ribs like it wanted out. The chill in the air had little to do with the cold and everything to do with what she'd just experienced inside Cora's table. She had only asked a few questions, dropped a few names, and suddenly she was being pushed out like a threat. The manager had known her name before she'd given it. That was the detail that haunted her now as she crouched behind a trash bin, ducking from sight as he stood just outside the restaurant entrance, scanning the street with tense eyes and his phone pressed to his ear. She couldn't hear what he was saying, but the posture alone told her he wasn't calling the health department or another staff member. Whoever was on the other end of that call mattered, and Jessica had the sickening feeling that she was being watched now, tracked. She pulled her flannel tighter around her, slinking deeper into the alley, breathing through the fear. This wasn't how she imagined it would go when she decided to follow the list. She had pictured herself as an observer, maybe even a ghost in the system, someone asking questions from the shadows, slipping in and out of cities unnoticed. But this felt more like walking into a lion's cage and realizing the lion already knows your scent. She waited until the manager went back inside, then emerged carefully and walked 5 blocks before pulling out her phone. She found a local coffee shop that didn't show up on food blogs, ducked inside, ordered a plain tea, and took a corner seat near the back. Her laptop hummed to life as she connected to their Wi-Fi, heart still pounding. She opened her folder marked Served Raw and clicked on the subfolder for Cora's table. Inside were screenshots, names of suppliers she had traced through LinkedIn, odd mentions from deleted blog comments, and now a new note. Manager identified Jessica by name before she gave it. She typed the words slowly, deliberately. Then she opened another tab and searched for inspection records again, this time trying back channels. She found a state-level database, older and less polished, and after 20 minutes of digging, finally uncovered a record that made her stomach twist. Cora's table had failed an inspection in December 2022. Mold in a walk-in cooler. Improper food storage. Cross-contamination. The inspector's name was blacked out in the PDF version. A follow-up inspection had been scheduled for January 10, 2023, but no result had been posted. It was listed as pending. 18 months pending. Jessica took a screenshot and saved it. Then she went further, cross-referencing employee names from LinkedIn with other restaurants and local businesses. One name popped out, Gavin Lark, former sous chef, last listed working at Cora's table in 2022, now employed at Bay Salt, one of the other restaurants on the list. That couldn't be coincidence. She pulled up Gavin's public profile, no photo, just a resume trail and a contact email. She sent a message. Hi Gavin, I'm working on a story involving overlapping staff between several restaurants in Denver and LA. Would you be open to a quick chat? Confidential, of course. She didn't expect a reply right away. She had learned long ago that reaching people close to the truth meant playing a waiting game. While the message sat in limbo, she turned to her next goal, understanding who was behind Cora's table. Public tax filings showed the LLC was registered under a shell company, Radiant Harvest Group. No website, no contact page, just a name tied to multiple restaurants in various states, including, chillingly, Hollow Fork, the last name on her list. She leaned back, blinking at the screen. This was no longer a series of isolated concerns. There was a pattern, a structure. Someone, or some group, owned multiple restaurants across the country, all with spotless online reputations, all seemingly immune to health violations, and all with whispers of sickness, corruption, or worse buried just beneath the surface. She saved the LLC info, then packed her things. As she stepped back out onto the street, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One new text. Are you trying to get hurt, Jessica? Stay out of Cora's. She froze. Her throat dried instantly. There was no sender ID. Just the sentence, stark on the screen. She looked around, pedestrians walking dogs, someone jogging past, a man with a paper cup playing guitar on the corner, but none of them looked at her. No one paused. She ducked into a bookstore, leaned against the wall by the travel guides, and stared at the message. She thought about deleting it, then screenshot it instead, saving it to the folder. Proof. She took out the paper list again, unfolded and smoothed it across her thigh. The 5 names stared back at her. Cora's table. Checked. The Crimson Room, next. She didn't know yet what she'd find there, but if there was a connection to Radiant Harvest, she was going to uncover it. She returned to her motel, checked out early, and bought a burner phone from a corner shop. Something told her this was no longer just research, it was protection. Before heading to the airport, she opened her blog platform and started typing the next entry. Title: Cora's table isn't what you think, and I have the receipts. She included the inspection screenshots, the shell company link, and the redacted health report. She left out names, too dangerous, but her tone was direct, angry, and impossible to ignore. She scheduled it to publish at midnight. That night, as her flight crossed the Midwest in silence and soft turbulence, she stared out at the clouds and thought about her mother. About the way she used to hum when she cooked, about the way her apron always had a smear of batter or a splash of sauce, about how she used food to show love. What would she think of this? Of her daughter traveling the country to dig up buried secrets in the very industry that was supposed to nourish people? Would she be proud? Afraid? Or both? Jessica wiped a tear before it could fall. This wasn't about healing anymore. This was about exposure. Whatever was happening in these restaurants wasn't negligence, it was organized. Protected. Possibly even funded from the top down. And someone out there knew she was digging. The text had made that clear. She landed in Chicago at 11:48 p.m., the airport eerily quiet, a far cry from the usual chaos. She moved through baggage claim with her hoodie up, face shadowed, nerves stretched thin. She had booked a cheap Airbnb under her middle name, with cash loaded onto a prepaid card. It wasn't paranoia. It was survival. When she reached the apartment, a cramped unit above a convenience store, she turned on all the lights, checked the windows twice, and finally let herself breathe. On her laptop, the blog post had already gained traction. Over 4,000 views. Comments flooding in. Some supportive. Some skeptical. One read, "I worked there." You're not wrong. But be careful. They don't forgive whistleblowers. She didn't sleep much that night. The Crimson Room would come next, but now she knew the stakes. She wasn't just risking backlash. She was risking retaliation. But it was too late to stop. She was in it now. The list had found the right person. And she would follow it to the end, no matter where it led. The Crimson Room didn't advertise. There was no sign outside, no sidewalk menu, no hours posted on Yelp. It lived by whispers and exclusivity, nestled between 2 brownstones in a quiet section of River North like a secret someone dared you to find. Jessica stood across the street that evening, watching the entrance, just a black door, red light above it, and a sharply dressed man with an earpiece who looked more like private security than a maitre d'. People walked past without noticing, but every 20 minutes or so, someone approached the door with the confidence of knowing they belonged, silk blazers, designer handbags, confidence soaked in money and secrets, and were let inside without a word. No one walked in off the street. You had to be invited. She checked the email again on her burner phone. Reservation confirmed. 7:30 p.m. for 2. Name, J. Wallace. It had come from an anonymous tip sent through her blog's contact form just 12 hours after she posted the Cora's Table exposé. No message, no name, just a reservation and the address. Part of her thought it was a trap. Another part knew she couldn't ignore it. She had dressed for anonymity, sleek black pants, hair pulled tight under a beret, makeup minimal. She crossed the street, flashed her ID and confirmation email to the stone-faced host, and was waved through without question. Inside, the Crimson Room unfolded like something from a dream drenched in blood and velvet. The lighting was deep red, casting everything in a moody glow. The walls were paneled in dark wood and soft leather. The tables were spaced deliberately apart, the kind of spacing that said privacy wasn't a luxury, it was policy. Jazz hummed from invisible speakers, the scent of aged scotch and seared meat hanging thick in the air. Her table was tucked in the back corner, behind a curtain half drawn, near a fireplace that wasn't for heat but effect. A waiter approached, silent and expressionless, and handed her a handwritten menu, no prices, just 7 items. Duck confit. Bone marrow tartare. Blue crab brulee. Every dish was more absurd than the last. She ordered a small plate of the squash blossoms and a glass of still water. He nodded once and vanished. Jessica leaned back in her seat and scanned the room. No one looked up. The crowd was older, richer. She recognized a tech CEO from a headline last year and a news anchor who swore they were vegan on national television. Everyone was playing a role. Everyone was pretending. The blossoms arrived, 5 delicate flowers stuffed with something mousse-like and topped with edible gold. She took one photo for documentation, didn't touch the food, and waited. At exactly 7:45, a woman slid into the seat across from her. Mid-40s, sharp gray suit, glasses with silver rims, and eyes that sliced through Jessica like X-rays. "I'm your host," she said. "And your warning." Jessica blinked. "Excuse me." The woman leaned in, folding her hands. "You're trespassing in a place that does not welcome press. Your little blog has been read by more people than you realize. And your name is being passed around by very dangerous men. Then why invite me?" Jessica asked. "Because I respect nerve," the woman said. "I was like you once. Curious. Loud. But here's the difference, I learned when to shut up. You still think there's a line between exposing and surviving." "There is," Jessica said evenly. "I'm still here." The woman smiled tightly. "For now." Jessica pressed forward. "What's happening here? What is this place, really?" The woman didn't blink. "It's what it looks like, a sanctuary for people who want to eat without scrutiny." "You're not the first to ask. But most don't ask twice. Why the secrecy? Why the security? Because we cater to appetites that the public doesn't understand." Jessica's stomach turned. "Define appetites." "Expensive. Exotic. Customized." The word hung there, cold and hard. Jessica's throat dried. She thought of rumors she had dismissed before, of restaurants importing banned ingredients, of chefs hired from military labs, of dishes served without labels because the guests didn't want to know. "Are people getting sick here?" she asked. "Or worse?" The woman tilted her head. "No one eats here without consent. That's the rule. No one is forced. But yes, some people can't handle what they ask for." "And Cora's table? Bay salt? Hollow fork? Different branches? Same roots?" Jessica stared. "You're saying they're all connected?" "More than connected," the woman said softly. "They're curated. Each one serves a different class of client. Some want indulgence. Others want rebellion. You're poking at an industry you can't imagine, Jessica. We don't just feed people. We engineer experiences. And we do it without interference because we're protected." "By who?" Jessica asked. The woman didn't answer. Just smiled. "This is your only invitation. No more visits. No more articles. Delete your posts, shut down your site, and disappear. Or the next meal won't be optional." Jessica's pulse pounded in her ears. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "Why give me the list? Why did someone hand me a warning if you don't want this exposed?" The woman's smile faded. "That list didn't come from us." "Then who?" "We're trying to find that out, too." The air between them stiffened. Jessica stood, her appetite long gone. "You can't scare me back into silence." "I don't have to," the woman said calmly. "You'll scare yourself when the next body turns up and you realize you could have stopped it, but didn't know how." Jessica walked out without another word. The red glow of the exit sign followed her all the way to the curb, where the night air felt sharp and unreal. She flagged a cab, didn't look back. Inside the cab, her hands trembled. She opened her notes app and typed everything she could remember, every phrase, every look, every threat. When she got back to her Airbnb, she bolted the door and backed up the audio from her hidden recorder. The sound was scratchy, but clear enough to transcribe. She spent the next 2 hours writing her post. Title: The Crimson Room Serves Secrets. Here's what they told me. She stripped away speculation. Just the facts. The menu. The reservation. The conversation. She blurred the woman's face in the security photo she'd snapped secretly on her way out. Posted it at 3:12 a.m. At 3:34, her site crashed. Server overload. At 3:40, she got a new email. Subject line: "They're watching. You're not safe in Chicago. Get out." Jessica stared at the screen. The sender was encrypted. No message body. Just that warning. She paced the room, mind racing. It was too late to back down now. She was pulling at a thread that wasn't unraveling, it was snapping. Something in her gut told her this was no longer about health violations or shady kitchens. This was organized. Protected. And maybe even ritualistic. She opened the list again. Crossed off the Crimson Room. 3 left. Bay Salt. Maison Fleurs. Hollow Fork. She didn't know what she'd find next. But she knew now that the deeper she went, the more dangerous it became. And somewhere along this path, someone had decided she was worth saving, or worth using. Either way, she couldn't stop. Not now. She booked a flight to Seattle. Bay Salt was next. Bay Salt sat on the edge of Seattle's waterfront like a knife set in glass, its walls steel and glass, sleek and modern, reflecting the gray skies and sharp lines of the harbor cranes across the bay. The restaurant's name was etched in minimalist silver on the door, just 3 inches tall, discreet and cold. Jessica stood outside that rainy afternoon, a black umbrella shielding her from the drizzle, her coat zipped to the neck. The clouds hung low and heavy over Elliott Bay, and everything smelled of salt, fish, and fog. It felt like the perfect place to hide a lie. She checked the time, 1:43 p.m., then stepped inside. The hostess greeted her with the same clinical efficiency she'd come to expect at these upscale places, barely looking up from her tablet. "Do you have a reservation?" Jessica nodded. J. Wallace. Solo. She was guided to a table by the floor-to-ceiling window, offered a menu printed on recycled bamboo paper, and poured a glass of mineral water without request. She thanked the server, then set her phone face down beside the napkin, glancing around. Bay Salt was quiet for lunch, no more than 6 or 7 other tables occupied, mostly business types on late meetings, suits hunched over seared tuna and seaweed salads, murmuring softly. The kitchen was open in the back, chefs moving with robotic grace. Above the kitchen hung a stark sign, "We don't just serve seafood, we serve the future." Jessica ordered a simple kelp noodle dish and a side of oysters, though she wouldn't touch either. She was here for one reason, Gavin Lark. The former sous chef from Cora's table had surfaced here according to her research, and while his name no longer appeared on the official staff page, her contact from the Denver food community had confirmed he still worked off-menu, consulting in the back, maybe even running prep in the private dining room downstairs. The moment the waiter walked off with her order, she got up, casually slinging her bag over her shoulder, and walked toward the restrooms. But instead of turning left into the public hallway, she turned right, past a curtained entrance marked, "Private Events." No one stopped her. The hallway narrowed, then descended a flight of concrete stairs, dimly lit by a blue overhead bulb. The air changed down there, colder, damp, laced with bleach and brine. At the bottom, she heard voices. She pressed herself against the wall, slowly inching closer. Two men stood near a stainless steel prep counter, one of them tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a white chef coat with sleeves rolled up. The other wore a dark utility apron and had an anxious energy, his hands twitching near his hips. Jessica recognized the taller one immediately from his LinkedIn profile photo, Gavin. "You told me it was clean," the anxious one said, voice low and tight. "It was," Gavin replied calmly. "You didn't store it properly. That's on you. They're asking questions upstairs. Someone posted about Crimson Room. Now people are looking into everything." "Let them look," Gavin said. "They won't find what matters." Jessica's hand gripped her phone. She tapped to start recording, kept her breath shallow. "They found the health records," the other man continued. "That woman from the blog, she was in Denver. She's not going away." "I know," Gavin said. "She'll come here, too. Let her. She's already deeper than she realizes. What if she exposes all of it?" Gavin shrugged. "She's only seeing the surface. That's all anyone ever sees." Jessica backed away silently, heart racing. She turned and crept back up the stairs, trying not to run, trying not to tremble. Back at her table, her untouched food had arrived, the oysters glistening on crushed ice, lemon wedges perched artfully on the side. She stared at them, remembering something the woman at Crimson Room had said, "We engineer experiences." Was this what that meant? Dishes designed to appear fresh, clean, and perfect, while behind closed doors, the truth rotted under bleach and silence. She paid the check in cash, left the food untouched, and walked out into the drizzle. Outside, she ducked into a bus shelter and replayed the audio clip. The sound was low, but Gavin's voice was clear. "She's already deeper than she realizes." Jessica uploaded the clip to her cloud drive, then backed it up on a USB she kept on a chain around her neck. She wasn't taking chances anymore. Her post that night was short and sharp, "Bay Salt secrets run deep," audio from inside the kitchen. She didn't name Gavin outright, but the implications were obvious. The post included transcriptions, timelines, the Shell Company connection, and a chilling theory, that the restaurants weren't just failing health standards but were part of a coordinated effort to manipulate what people consumed, and perhaps even how. Comments exploded. Some denied. Some confessed. One stood out, "I used to work at Maison Fleurs. There's something under the floor. Locked freezer no one talks about." That was the next one. Maison Fleurs. Los Angeles. Jessica packed that night, but before leaving Seattle, she got another email, this one with a video attachment. No sender. Just the subject line, "You're not done yet." The video was 30 seconds long. Grainy footage of a walk-in freezer. Inside it, shelves of unmarked containers, no labels, no dates. Then a frame showing a tattoo on someone's wrist, the same symbol she'd seen in the Crimson Room's private dining area etched into a wall, a circle with 3 knives crossing at the center. She'd thought it was a design. Now she knew it was a mark. A brand. A network. She saved the video, encrypted it, and erased the trace from the burner phone. Jessica no longer felt like a writer. She felt like a whistleblower chasing ghosts. At the airport, her boarding pass flagged for random screening. TSA patted her down. Opened her bag. Asked too many questions. But eventually let her go. She knew it wouldn't be the last time. On the plane to Los Angeles, she stared out the window and felt the dread settle deep in her bones. 3 down. 2 to go. And now, someone was feeding her clues. Someone inside. But why? To help. To control the narrative? Or to bait her into going too far? The line between investigation and manipulation blurred more with each city. Still, she couldn't stop. She had gone too far. Seen too much. She wasn't just telling a story anymore. She was living it. And with every step forward, the air got colder. The shadows grew longer. And the food, so elegant, so beautiful, started to look like a weapon. Maison Fleurs didn't look like a restaurant from the outside. It looked like an art gallery trapped in a dream, ivory stucco walls covered in vines, massive French windows with gauzy curtains, and a delicate golden sign that read simply MF in calligraphic script. Tucked into a narrow side street just off Melrose Place, the building exuded quiet affluence, the kind that came with curated exclusivity and whispered reputations. Jessica stood across the street behind a palm tree, watching guests arrive in sleek cars and handmade shoes. It was all curated beauty, just like the dishes they served. According to the reviews, Maison Fleurs was known for its intimacy, its botanical themes, and its experiential dining. Every table was surrounded by flowers. Every bite was supposed to evoke a garden in bloom. But under the perfect petals and filtered lighting, something had rotted. She knew that now. The anonymous comment under her basalt post still burned in her brain. I used to work at Maison Fleurs. There's something under the floor. Locked freezer no one talks about. She wasn't here to taste anything. She was here to dig. Her reservation was at 6:45 p.m., again under J. Wallace. She wore a soft beige dress and heels low enough to run in, her hair loosely pinned to blend in with the upscale crowd. The host greeted her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, checked her name, and led her through a hallway of fresh-cut lilies into the main room. It was absurdly quiet. The only sounds were ambient strings and the occasional soft clink of silverware. Her table was near the back, beside a floor-to-ceiling wall of glass where vines curled upward under delicate lighting. The air smelled faintly of rosewater and saffron. A single pink peony sat in a bud vase on her table. The menu was printed on thick textured paper, barely legible in looping cursive. She ordered the Verde Garden, starter and sparkling water, then excused herself to the restroom. But instead of going right to the powder room, she turned left, following a hallway that led past the kitchens and toward a staff-only door marked storage. She listened for footsteps, heard none, then slipped through. Inside was a small prep area with dry goods, metal shelves, crates of wine bottles, and a freezer door in the corner that looked older than everything else. It was massive, iron, with a wheel lock instead of a handle. Dusty around the edges. It didn't match the rest of the pristine interior. She stepped closer, pulled out her phone, and snapped photos quickly. Then she turned the wheel. It didn't budge. She tugged again, harder. Still locked. Footsteps echoed behind her and she froze. "That's not for guests," a voice said coldly. She turned to see a man in black kitchen whites, arms crossed. His name tag said, Mark. Head chef. "Sorry," she said, feigning confusion. "I got lost looking for the bathroom. I thought this was." "It's not," he cut in. "Please return to your table." She walked past him, heart pounding, expecting a hand to grip her arm. But he didn't touch her. Just watched. She sat back down just as the appetizer arrived, a bizarre sculpture of cucumber foam, microgreens, and what looked like edible moss shaped like a butterfly. She didn't touch it. She scanned the room for security cameras. There, tucked in the ivy arch above the open kitchen. Another above the door to the hallway. And one outside, pointed at the entrance. She pulled her napkin to her lap and checked her phone. One new message, from an unknown sender. They locked the freezer after someone found the samples. The chef knows. You have 30 minutes. She stared at the text, bile rising in her throat. Samples? Of what? Her mind spun through theories. organics, contraband imports, maybe even synthetic ingredients banned in the US. But the tone of the warning suggested something worse. Her fingers flew as she messaged back. Who are you? What samples? Tell me what I'm walking into. No reply. She waited 10 seconds, 20. Nothing. She had to move. She slipped out again, but this time took a different route, around the back, through the patio lined with white rose bushes. There was a delivery door with a keypad lock. She pulled a small multi-tool from her purse and began removing the cover, nerve stretched thin. If someone caught her, there'd be no pretending now. She heard a car door slam nearby, voices on the street, and then the lock gave way with a soft click. She was in. The back hallway was empty. She sprinted toward the freezer room and pulled out a small piece of folded plastic she had soaked in hand sanitizer. She rubbed it along the bolt of the iron freezer. Nothing. She tried again, pressing harder, praying the alcohol might loosen whatever sticky mechanism sealed the door. A click echoed. The wheel moved. The door creaked open. She stepped inside, using her phone's flashlight. The air was freezing, her breath misting immediately. Inside were long metal racks, empty crates, and 5 large plastic tubs with red lids. She lifted one. It was filled with vials, hundreds of them, glass tubes, each labeled only with a code. Some were clear. Others cloudy. A few were red. She snapped photo after photo, then tried to grab one of the vials to pocket, but suddenly footsteps rang behind her. She turned, and Mark stood in the doorway, expression unreadable. I told you not to come here, he said. What is this? She demanded, holding up her phone. What are these? You need to leave, he said. Now. Tell me what they are, or I publish everything. You won't live long enough to hit publish, he said quietly. Get out while you still can. She stepped past him quickly, back into the hall. He didn't follow. She ran, out the back, through the alley, past the perfume-scented dumpsters and into the city night. She didn't stop running until she reached a gas station on the next block. There, under harsh fluorescent lights, she opened her phone and uploaded every image. That night, she posted the update. Title, What's in the freezer at Maison Fleurs? I found out. She didn't claim to know what the vials were. But she included the photos, the chef's threat, and a map of connections, Cora's table, Crimson Room, Bay Salt, and now Maison Fleurs, all tied to the same shell company, Radiant Harvest Group. The post spread fast. Comments exploded. Then came another message. You're almost at the end. The last restaurant isn't what you think. It's where it began. And where it ends. Hollow Fork is waiting. Come alone. Jessica booked a red-eye to New York. She sat at the gate, arms wrapped around her carry-on, staring at the glowing departure board. Hollow Fork. The name had been last on the list, but now it felt like it had been waiting the whole time. Every step had led here. Every clue, every warning. This wasn't a restaurant. It was a ritual. And she was about to walk into the heart of it. Hollow Fork didn't have a location on Google Maps. It wasn't listed in any dining guides, had no Instagram account, no website, and no listed phone number. And yet, everyone in the underground food scene in Manhattan seemed to know it existed. They talked about it in code, in half-jokes, in nervous glances over their shoulders, as if just saying its name could bring a shadow through the door. Jessica had arrived in New York exhausted, emotionally scraped raw, nerves fried to copper wire. She had checked into a low-rise motel near Queens and locked herself in the room for almost 10 hours, rotating between naps and frantic research. She had combed through message boards, scoured Reddit threads with titles like, Is Hollow Fork Real? And, I served one night and never went back. The stories were all variations on the same theme, staff that disappeared, deliveries made by black vans, rumors of test kitchens where no one ever left with leftovers. Finally, someone emailed her through an encrypted form on her site. No greeting. Just, Hollow Fork doesn't appear until you're invited. You've been invited. 8 p.m. sharp. Ask the flower vendor on 7th and Clarkson for a night bloom. That was it. She read it 5 times before closing the laptop and staring at the ceiling, heart thudding. She didn't know if this was the end of the list or the start of something worse. But she was going. She had come this far. The truth was no longer just a goal, it was an obsession. At 7:52 p.m., she stepped out of a cab and walked toward 7th and Clarkson, heart thudding with every step. A flower vendor stood under a flickering street lamp, his cart lined with tulips and roses. His eyes met hers before she even spoke. A night bloom, she said softly. He nodded and handed her a single black lily wrapped in newspaper. No words. No charge. Then he gestured toward a door across the street. It was set into a blank brick wall, no markings, just a metal handle and a single brass plaque that read, "Private Event." Jessica crossed slowly, feeling as though she were about to fall off the edge of the world. She knocked once. The door opened before she could knock again. A man in a dark suit stood silently, gesturing for her to enter. She did. Inside, the room was narrow, lined with candles. The scent of smoke and rosemary hung in the air. A woman in a black velvet gown waited at the far end, standing behind a podium. "Welcome to Hollow Fork," she said. "You are expected." Jessica said nothing. She was led down a spiral staircase, deeper and deeper underground, until the sound of the city disappeared entirely. They emerged into a massive chamber that didn't look like any restaurant she had ever seen. It was cathedral-like, vaulted ceilings, long communal tables of dark wood, everything lit by flame. There were no menus. No servers. Just figures in black seated silently, heads bowed, as steaming platters were placed before them by faceless attendants in gloves. Jessica was guided to the end of the longest table. A place setting waited for her, silver fork, black napkin, and a glass of deep red liquid that didn't look quite like wine. She didn't sit. "What is this place?" she whispered. A voice answered from behind her. "It's the reason you were given the list." She turned slowly. An older man, white-haired, eyes like dull marbles, stood in the shadows. He wore no name tag, no title. But she could feel the weight of authority pouring off him like heat. "Who are you?" she asked. "I'm the one who built Hollow Fork. And the one who gave you that list." Jessica's mind reeled. "Why?" "Because you're the only one who could expose it without being silenced. The only one stubborn enough to keep digging. You were born for this. And we needed someone like you." "Needed? To do what?" "To see how far the truth could be stretched before it broke. To witness the system we created without running. And now you're here, at the end. You've seen the shell companies. The vials. The threats. The silence. But you still don't understand what this is." "Then tell me," she said. "Tell me everything." He stepped closer, voice low. "Food isn't just sustenance anymore. It's identity. Power. Obsession. People will eat anything if you wrap it in beauty. If you serve it with the right wine. Hollow Fork is proof. Every one of the restaurants you visited is a test chamber. We introduce controlled substances, measure behavioral responses, monitor psychological shifts. Maison fleurs. Sensory conditioning. Crimson room. Consent thresholds. Cora's table. Community influence. You're experimenting on diners?" Jessica asked, horror creeping into her voice. "With what? Drugs? Biotech? And ideas," he said. "Philosophies. Beliefs. The palate is the most vulnerable part of the human mind. We don't feed people food. We feed them possibilities. That's insane, she said. You're poisoning people. No, he replied. We're awakening them. You saw the people eating here. The silence. The devotion. No one leaves Hollow Fork unchanged. You're manipulating them. We're evolving them. Why show me this? She demanded. Why not just kill me if you wanted to stay hidden? Because secrets don't disappear, he said. They multiply. But stories? They can be guided. You'll write your truth. And we'll let you. Because it serves us. You'll expose the outer layer, the breadcrumbs. But the core. That stays buried. Always. You think I'll play along? You already have. You followed the list. You spread the names. You fed the fire. You've done more for our expansion than you realize. Jessica's knees felt weak. You used me. No. We trusted you. And now, we offer you a seat at the table. He gestured to the open chair. Join us. Or leave. But either way, the story will live. And so will the fork. Jessica stared at the chair. Then at the drink. Then back at the man. And in that moment, she realized the final twist. The story had never been hers. Not really. She had just been the final course. The perfect blend of desperation and defiance. The question wasn't what she would publish. It was whether she would survive it. She turned without sitting, without drinking, and walked back through the candlelit hallway, her heartbeat echoing in her ears like war drums. She didn't speak until she reached the street, didn't breathe until she'd run 3 blocks and ducked into the alley behind a diner. There, under the rattle of an AC vent, she opened her phone. She had recorded it all. Every word. Every threat. Every name. She uploaded the file, encrypted it 6 times, and hit send all. She didn't know where it would land, but someone out there would listen. Someone had to. She looked up at the New York skyline, alive with lights and illusions, and whispered to herself, they thought this was the end. But it's only the beginning. Then she disappeared into the night. Jessica didn't sleep the night after Hollow Fork. Her body trembled from a mix of adrenaline and terror, her mind replaying every word, every candlelit glare, every cryptic threat. The file had been sent. Voice recordings, notes, photos, names, timelines, everything she'd uncovered over the past 6 weeks. She didn't send it to one news outlet, she sent it to 50. Small papers. Underground zines. A few major networks. Anonymous tips. She had no way of knowing who'd act on it, who'd be silenced, who'd even believe her. But by morning, the cracks began to show. At 6:12 a.m., an email pinged her inbox from a journalist she admired, Darren Koch, a hard-hitting food and crime writer for the Dispatch. All it said was, "Is this real?" She replied instantly, "Come see for yourself." She shared a private drive. By 6:30, he was calling her, voice sharp, full of questions, disbelief laced with urgent curiosity. By 7:15, he told her he was going to publish something preliminary, just enough to open the gates. At 9:04 a.m., the Dispatch released a headline that stopped the internet cold, inside the menu, secret experiments and food rituals at elite U.S. restaurants. The piece didn't name Jessica directly, but it referenced an independent investigator who risked her safety to uncover a network of experimental culinary labs disguised as restaurants. Within minutes, her phone was vibrating non-stop. Other journalists. Former employees. Anonymous DMs. People who had eaten at those restaurants and felt strange afterward. Nausea. Euphoria. Vivid dreams. Memory gaps. Panic attacks. One man emailed her a video of himself shaking uncontrollably after a meal at Maison Fleurs, claiming he'd been prescribed antipsychotics after that night. Another woman said her boyfriend vanished 3 days after eating at Cora's table and was later found in a remote wellness facility in Switzerland with no memory of how he got there. Jessica sifted through every message, cataloging the evidence, backing up everything 3 times, and wondering just how deep this went. She knew she couldn't go public herself, not yet. Her face was now a target, her name bouncing around in places she hadn't even imagined. She switched hotels, cut off her personal accounts, and communicated only through encrypted platforms. The more people shared their stories, the clearer the pattern became. This wasn't just a string of high-end restaurants gone rogue. This was infrastructure. Coordinated. Protected. Global. People in Berlin emailed. Seoul. Dubai. Places with eerily similar restaurants, all tied back to shell companies with elegant branding and obscure missions. It wasn't just Radiant Harvest Group anymore. New names surfaced. Verdant Process. Knife Point Holdings. A parent company in the Caymans called Iroka. Jessica documented it all. She couldn't stop. Her notes became an atlas of conspiracy, each pin on the map marked with a whisper and a scar. Then came the counterpunch. 3 days after the Dispatch article, Radiant Harvest issued a public statement: "We categorically deny any involvement in unlawful or unethical food practices. Our group supports innovation and sustainability in culinary arts. We have cooperated fully with the authorities in every jurisdiction." But there were no authorities. That was the trick. There had been no raids, no subpoenas. Just statements. Just denials. Hollow Fork was gone. She checked the location 3 days later, nothing there. The brick wall was sealed, the flower vendor replaced. It had vanished like a stage after the curtain fell. But the fear remained. Jessica started noticing people following her. A man in a gray coat who kept showing up near her hotels. A woman with red glasses who always seemed to be on the opposite subway platform. She began changing routes. Wearing disguises. Sleeping with one eye open. She knew the exposure came with risk. But she hadn't expected the silence to be louder than the headlines. People were sharing her story, but not acting. No arrests. No investigations. No government inquiries. It was like the entire industry had made a collective decision: ignore it and it'll go away. She wrote again. And again. Her new piece, published anonymously but picked up by over a dozen international outlets, was titled "The Knife Behind the Curtain: Why No One's Stopping the Most Dangerous Restaurants in America." In it, she named Gavin Lark. Described the vials. The locked freezer. The phrases used by the man at Hollow Fork. She cited the NDA language used by Maison Fleurs staff. She attached leaked contracts, floor plans, even invoices. It hit harder. People started tagging celebrities known to dine at these places. Twitter threads exploded. Someone leaked a photo of a private dinner attended by a state senator and 2 CEOs, one of them a major investor in Verdant Process. Hashtags trended. But still, no action. No handcuffs. No closures. Jessica started to understand. It wasn't just that the story was too bizarre to believe. It was that people didn't want to believe it. They wanted to keep their beautiful meals, their curated plates, their illusions of control. If you told someone their favorite tasting menu had been designed by a behavioral psychologist working with neurochemical consultants, they'd laugh, until they realized it might be true. She kept pushing. More emails poured in. Former chefs. Security guards. Cleaning staff. One woman said she cleaned up blood from a private event at the Crimson Room, told it was animal runoff, but she never saw an animal delivered. Another said the flowers at Maison Fleurs were sprayed with something that gave her nosebleeds. An intern from Bay Salt said they were told to wipe down packages with gloves and dispose of any broken vials in a burn box. Jessica compiled every statement, every clue, into a report now spanning over 400 pages. And she kept looking for the one piece that would tip the whole thing over. The one undeniable proof. Then, it came. An anonymous sender dropped a flash drive into a P.O. box she'd set up under a fake name. Inside it was a video, 9 minutes long, of a Hollow Fork session. Secretly filmed. No narration. No edits. Just a table of 9 people. Eating. Silent. Until one of them began convulsing. The others didn't stop eating. 2 attendants calmly dragged the shaking diner away, and the rest kept chewing, eyes half closed in bliss. Jessica watched it 3 times. The time code in the corner showed it was dated 2 months before her visit. She sent it to Coke. He published it immediately. The clip was stripped, anonymized, posted everywhere. CNN ran a segment. The Guardian. BBC. People demanded to know who the diners were. If the convulsing guest had lived. Who was filming? Jessica stayed silent. She had to. It was getting too close. Then came the text. She didn't flinch. She posted the threat. Made it public. Pinned it to the top of her new blog, which now had over 4 million visitors in a week. She wrote, "If they're threatening me, it means they're afraid. Keep sharing. Keep digging. Don't let the silence win." She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But she knew one thing for sure. She had torn the veil. Now the world had to choose whether to look through it, or keep eating in the dark. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The weeks following the release of the Hollow Fork video felt like a powder keg lit on all sides. The public outcry grew into a roar, protests erupted in front of the now-closed Maison Fleurs locations, and online communities buzzed with theories and calls for accountability. Yet, the official response remained frustratingly muted. Law enforcement agencies issued statements promising due diligence, but no raids, no arrests, no tangible actions were taken. Jessica's life had become a whirlwind of interviews, encrypted meetings, and sleepless nights. She moved constantly, sometimes relying on friends she barely knew for shelter and protection. Still, the threats didn't stop. One night, as she was leaving a small cafe in Brooklyn, a man in a dark hoodie stepped close and whispered, "You're playing a dangerous game." Before she could react, he vanished into the shadows. That encounter left her shaken but resolute. The story was bigger than her fear. And then, unexpectedly, the tipping point came not from the authorities, but from inside the industry itself. A whistleblower emerged, a sous chef named Mia Sanchez, who had worked at the Crimson Room before quitting in disgust. Mia contacted Jessica through a secure line, her voice trembling with fear and urgency. "I have documents," she said. "Proof of payments, emails, even video footage from staff-only cameras. But I need to know I'll be protected." Jessica promised everything she could: anonymity, legal aid, safety measures. Within days, Mia sent a package encrypted with multiple layers, containing a treasure trove of evidence that detailed how the Radiant Harvest Group manipulated food supplies, influenced mental states, and controlled high-profile patrons. The documents showed contracts with biotech firms, chemical suppliers, and marketing agencies designed to control consumer behavior through flavor engineering and psychological triggers. The emails between executives casually discussed conditioning and loyalty patterns, revealing a disturbing corporate culture where customers were seen as test subjects rather than people. Jessica published a carefully curated report with Mia's help, revealing the inner workings of the network with clarity and undeniable proof. This time, the story hit a nerve even the most powerful couldn't ignore. Celebrities and politicians who had dined at these places found themselves under intense scrutiny. One senator cancelled a fundraiser after being confronted with images from the leaked emails. Celebrities issued statements claiming ignorance and severed ties with implicated restaurants. Social media campaigns surged, demanding congressional hearings and criminal investigations. The pressure forced the Department of Justice to open a formal inquiry. For the first time, real questions were being asked in public forums. The lead prosecutor, a tenacious woman named Linda Marsh, took the case personally. During a televised hearing, she grilled former employees and executives. She pressed companies on their safety standards and compliance with food regulations. But even Marsh faced obstacles. Key witnesses vanished, documents disappeared, and mysterious legal injunctions stalled progress. It was clear that the opposition had deep pockets and powerful allies. Meanwhile, Jessica's personal life was unraveling. The stress, constant danger, and public spotlight strained her relationships. Her best friend, Amy, begged her to step back and find some peace, but Jessica refused. She had tasted the truth. There was no going back. One night, alone in a small apartment she rented under an alias, Jessica received a call from an unexpected source, Gavin Lark. His voice was calm, almost cordial. "Jessica," he said, "you've stirred a hornet's nest. I want to offer you a deal." Her instinct screamed at her to hang up. "What kind of deal?" she asked warily. "Information. Access. Protection. We want you to write the final story. The true story. Not some wild conspiracy fueled by fear." Jessica hesitated. Was this a trap? A manipulation? Or a chance to see the entire truth? "What's the catch?" she asked. "You publish it exactly as we provide. No edits. No additions. No leaks. It's the end of the story, for everyone." She thought about the faces she had seen convulsing in Hollow Fork, the emails from victims, the silence from officials. Could she trust him? Or was she stepping into a cage? "I'll consider it," she said. The line went dead. The offer haunted her. Days passed in a haze of indecision. Then Mia called. "Jessica," she said urgently, "they know about you talking to Lark. Be careful." The next morning, Jessica's safe house was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but her files were rifled through. The message was clear: stop or face consequences. But the public momentum had become unstoppable. A grassroots movement called Fork Free sprang up, demanding transparency, better food safety laws, and corporate accountability. Restaurants once untouchable found themselves boycotted and under scrutiny. Investors pulled funding. Yet, the fight wasn't just external. Inside Jessica, a battle raged. The offer from Lark promised a resolution, but at what cost? Could she sacrifice truth for safety? Was the final story just another manipulation? One evening, as she walked through Central Park, she met Darren Koch. His expression was grave but determined. "You're not alone," he said. "We can do this together." They discussed strategies, pooling resources and contacts. Jessica realized the strength in collaboration. The fight wasn't hers alone. Then came a break. An insider within Iroka sent a detailed financial report to the DOJ, evidence of money laundering, bribery, and illegal experiments. The DOJ moved swiftly, launching raids in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. Media cameras captured the first arrests of executives linked to the scandal. Public trust cracked. The culinary world was shaken. Jessica and Darren covered every moment. But as the dust settled, it was clear the network was vast and resilient. New fronts opened overseas, new companies emerged under different names. The story was far from over. In a final act of defiance, Jessica agreed to meet Gavin Lark in a neutral location, a small cafe in Philadelphia. The meeting was tense. Lark was charismatic, unrepentant, and disturbingly candid. "You have to understand," he said, "this isn't about food. It's about evolution. Society needs control to progress. We offer that control." Jessica listened but refused to concede. "People deserve choice," she said. "Not manipulation." Their conversation ended without agreement but with mutual respect. Jessica left knowing the battle ahead would be long, complicated, and uncertain. Yet, she felt stronger. The tipping point had been reached. The veil lifted, the fight ignited. And the world was watching. Jessica's world had shifted irreversibly. The momentum from the DOJ raids and the arrests created a seismic tremor across the industry, yet the victory felt incomplete, like stepping into a storm only to find the eye was calm, but the wind still howled. The culinary landscape had fractured, forcing everyone connected to these elite restaurants to confront their own roles, their own compromises. For Jessica, the crossroads weren't just external, they cut deeply into her own sense of purpose and identity. Every move she made was scrutinized, every alliance questioned. After the meeting with Gavin Lark, she felt caught between two realms. The one she fought to expose and the shadowy power it wielded, and the world desperate to believe in change but unsure how to move forward. Her relationship with Darren deepened in these uncertain times, their collaboration evolving into a tentative friendship grounded in shared risk and a fragile trust. They spent hours poring over documents, strategizing their next steps, and debriefing sources who still feared for their lives. One afternoon, while going through encrypted messages, they uncovered a shocking revelation: a secret recipe vault buried deep within the infrastructure of Verdant Process, housing not just dishes but biochemical formulas engineered to manipulate emotions, memory, even behavior. This was no longer about food as a mere indulgence, it was weaponized art, a tool of control disguised by flavors and aromas. The vault's location was rumored to be in a renovated industrial complex on the outskirts of Chicago, heavily guarded and accessible only through layers of biometric security. The discovery posed a dilemma. Should they attempt to expose the vault? Could they get inside? Was the risk worth the reward? Jessica wrestled with the possibility that infiltrating the vault might be their best chance to uncover the full extent of the conspiracy. But it could also be a trap or worse, lead to irreversible consequences. As they planned, Jessica's thoughts kept drifting to her own family. Amy, who had urged her to stop before, now expressed concern over Jessica's health and safety. Her parents, unaware of the full scope of the investigation, worried quietly about her disappearing acts and shadowed eyes. Jessica realized she was drifting farther from the life she had known, and closer to an abyss she couldn't yet see the bottom of. The pressure mounted when a former marketing director for Radiant Harvest, named Elliot Graham, came forward anonymously with insider testimony and documents detailing psychological experiments conducted on unsuspecting diners. According to Elliot, the group had partnered with neuroscientists experimenting with neurogastronomy, combining food stimuli with brainwave manipulation to influence mood and decision-making. His disclosures intensified public outcry and put new faces in the spotlight. Yet, Elliot's credibility was questioned, and he disappeared shortly after giving his statement. The disappearance was a chilling reminder of the stakes. Meanwhile, the government began to implement new regulations on food safety, ingredient transparency, and psychological ethics in gastronomy, prompted by mounting public pressure and media attention. The culinary world braced for a revolution. Yet some players doubled down, rebranding and shifting operations overseas, where oversight was weaker. Jessica and Darren decided the best way forward was a public exposé that would reveal the vault's secrets and the true scale of the manipulation network. But gaining access to the vault was nearly impossible without inside help. Through a trusted contact, they connected with Ava, a former security specialist who had worked briefly for Verdant Process before leaving under mysterious circumstances. Ava agreed to help them get close to the vault in exchange for protection and anonymity. The plan was risky. Ava would attempt to infiltrate the facility posing as a technician, while Jessica and Darren coordinated from a safe house, ready to disseminate any data she could extract. Preparation took weeks, obtaining fake credentials, learning the layout, and assembling the technology needed to record and transmit data covertly. Jessica grappled with waves of doubt but pushed forward, driven by a sense of responsibility and the knowledge that exposure was their best weapon against the shadowy empire. The night Ava entered the complex was tense. Jessica and Darren waited anxiously, watching encrypted feeds for any sign of breach or distress. Hours passed with no word. Then, a message came through: Ava was inside and moving toward the vault. They monitored her progress as she navigated security doors, avoided patrols, and accessed the biometric systems with precision. The vault itself was a refrigerated chamber lined with shelves, boxes, and sealed containers labeled with chemical formulas and coded names. Ava began documenting everything: videos, photos, detailed notes. Suddenly, alarms blared. Ava's voice came through, panicked but controlled: "Security's on to me. I'm moving to extraction point." Jessica's heart pounded as she coordinated with Darren to guide her escape. After a nerve-wracking chase through corridors and tight spaces, Ava reached the exit, narrowly avoiding capture. The data she retrieved was staggering: chemical compositions designed to trigger anxiety relief, heightened euphoria, even induced compliance. Some recipes included rare botanical extracts banned in many countries for their psychoactive effects. Others combined sensory stimuli with subconscious cues to encourage brand loyalty and repeat patronage. The scope of manipulation was deeper and more calculated than Jessica had imagined. She knew this evidence would change everything. The following days were a whirlwind. Jessica and Darren published the findings alongside Ava's testimony. The exposé ignited global conversations about ethics, corporate power, and the thin line between innovation and exploitation. Governments worldwide pledged reforms. Culinary schools revised curricula. Chefs publicly denounced the practices. But as the story gained momentum, Jessica's health deteriorated. Sleepless nights, anxiety attacks, and the weight of constant danger took their toll. Amy visited, pleading for Jessica to consider stepping back, even if temporarily. Yet, Jessica's resolve held firm. She knew the crossroads were only just beginning. The fight to reclaim the integrity of food and choice was far from over. Every victory revealed new challenges. The Shadow Empire was adapting, changing shapes, and finding new ways to infiltrate daily life. But Jessica had lit a fire. The world was no longer blind to the dark menu hidden beneath the gloss. And as she stood at this crossroads, she realized that the true battle wasn't just about exposing secrets but about choosing what kind of future people wanted to taste. Jessica's exposé on the secret vault sent shockwaves far beyond the culinary world. Headlines splashed the revelations across newspapers and online platforms, fueling public outrage and demanding swift accountability. The fallout was immediate and far-reaching. Investors began pulling funds from implicated companies, stock prices of industry giants plummeted, and regulatory bodies scrambled to enforce new guidelines and investigate ongoing violations. Restaurants once celebrated as temples of gourmet innovation were suddenly tainted by scandal, their reputations crumbling under the weight of deception. Yet beneath the surface of public victory, a darker reality unfolded. The entities behind Radiant Harvest and Verdant Process weren't simply going quietly. Powerful lobbyists launched campaigns to muddy the waters, casting doubt on the authenticity of the leaked data, framing it as sensationalism from an overzealous journalist. Fake news outlets circulated conspiracy theories suggesting Jessica had personal vendettas, aiming to discredit her credibility. Social media trolls bombarded her with threats and misinformation. The personal attacks escalated quickly, becoming harassment that forced Jessica to tighten security around her online presence and personal life. Despite this, allies rallied to her side. Grassroots organizations like Fork Free gained unprecedented support, organizing marches, petitions, and town hall meetings demanding transparency and reform. Chefs and industry insiders who had remained silent began breaking their silence, sharing their own experiences of coercion and manipulation. The DOJ hearings intensified, with Linda Marsh leading the charge to dismantle the network's remaining strongholds. Yet the investigation revealed the complex entanglement of these food corporations with political figures and international financiers, creating a labyrinthine web that complicated justice. Meanwhile, Jessica's relationship with Darren grew more complicated. The pressure of the case, combined with their long hours and constant danger, introduced strains. Trust was tested as secrets were kept for safety, and moments of doubt crept in. But through it all, they leaned on each other as the fight grew fiercer. One night, a particularly aggressive smear campaign culminated in a break-in at Jessica's safe house. No data was stolen, but the message was clear: the Shadow Empire still had reach and wasn't backing down. This intrusion shook Jessica deeply, forcing her to reconsider her approach. The stress began to manifest physically: exhaustion, panic attacks, and a sense of isolation. Amy urged her to take a step back, emphasizing that no story was worth losing oneself. Jessica, however, felt that retreat would mean surrender. In the midst of this turmoil, a surprising figure emerged: Senator Claire Donovan, who had previously cancelled fundraisers after her name was tied to the scandal. Now, she publicly condemned the manipulative practices and vowed to champion comprehensive legislation to protect consumers and ensure transparency. Donovan's shift galvanized lawmakers, accelerating bipartisan support for reform bills addressing food safety, marketing ethics, and consumer rights. Still, passing legislation wasn't enough. Implementation and enforcement became the new battlefield. Jessica and Darren expanded their investigative scope, uncovering that some companies had already begun shifting operations overseas, exploiting less stringent regulations and using digital platforms to reach customers anonymously. International cooperation was needed but difficult to coordinate. Amid this chaos, Ava remained a vital asset. Though still living in hiding, she provided crucial insights into security systems and covert operations, helping Jessica's team anticipate moves by the corporate entities. Ava's testimony at congressional hearings added credibility and humanized the consequences of corporate greed and manipulation. The emotional toll on Jessica deepened as she grappled with the real lives affected by these schemes: families whose health was compromised, individuals psychologically manipulated, and communities betrayed by the very institutions they trusted. One night, after a long day of meetings and media appearances, Jessica found herself overwhelmed by the magnitude of the fight. In a rare moment of vulnerability, she called Amy. "I'm scared I'm losing myself," she admitted. Amy's voice was gentle but firm. "You're human, Jessica. It's okay to be scared. But don't forget why you started this. Take care of yourself too." That conversation marked a turning point. Jessica began seeking therapy to manage her anxiety and rebuild connections with friends and family she'd pushed away. She learned to balance the fight with moments of peace, realizing that resilience came from preserving her humanity as much as from exposing truth. Meanwhile, the media landscape evolved. Documentaries, podcasts, and books surfaced, telling stories of whistleblowers, victims, and activists involved in the scandal. Jessica was interviewed extensively but insisted on focusing on the larger movement rather than personal fame. Through it all, a persistent question lingered: how deep did the manipulation really go? Was the conspiracy limited to the known companies, or was it a symptom of a broader systemic issue within global food industries? Jessica and Darren pursued this question relentlessly, uncovering new leads that hinted at even greater networks operating internationally. The road ahead was uncertain, but the foundation for change had been laid. The world was waking up. As Jessica prepared for another round of testimony before Congress, she reflected on the journey. The fallout had been brutal and unrelenting, but it had also sparked something powerful: awareness, resistance, and hope. The battle wasn't over, but the tide was turning. And through the darkest nights, Jessica found strength in the knowledge that exposing the truth was the first step toward reclaiming control, not just over food, but over lives and futures. Jessica felt the weight of the fallout from the exposé but also recognized the power of momentum. The battle to dismantle the shadowy control of Radiant Harvest and its affiliates was evolving into something bigger, a movement requiring alliances across unexpected lines. Early on, Jessica and Darren had worked mostly alone or with a few trusted insiders, but the expanding scope of the fight demanded new partnerships. One of the most surprising alliances emerged from the heart of the culinary world itself. Marcus Hayes, a renowned chef and restaurateur known for his outspoken criticism of industry excess, reached out. Marcus had initially been cautious, wary of the potential backlash to his career. But the evidence and public pressure had shifted his stance. He offered not just moral support but access to his network of chefs, suppliers, and industry insiders willing to speak out. Jessica and Marcus quickly found common ground. Marcus had witnessed firsthand the subtle pressures restaurants face to conform to Radiant Harvest's marketing and supply chain dominance. He described how menus were influenced by proprietary ingredients designed to maximize addictive pleasure rather than culinary excellence. His willingness to go public inspired others, creating a ripple effect. Simultaneously, advocacy groups focused on consumer rights and food safety sought to formalize a coalition. Groups like Fork Free joined forces with organizations fighting for environmental sustainability, labor rights, and public health, recognizing their causes were intertwined. These coalitions pooled resources, coordinated campaigns, and pushed for comprehensive policy reforms that addressed not only the manipulation exposed in the vault but also broader systemic issues like food deserts, pesticide use, and wage exploitation in the industry. In Washington, Senator Claire Donovan became a pivotal figure. She spearheaded the introduction of the Food Integrity Act, designed to increase transparency, impose harsher penalties on deceptive practices, and mandate independent oversight. Lobbyists from implicated corporations fought fiercely against the bill, but public support and bipartisan backing kept it moving forward. Jessica was called to testify multiple times, her voice a steady beacon amid heated debates. The process was exhausting but crucial. Outside the political arena, technology played a key role in forming new alliances. Darren, with his background in cybersecurity, developed encrypted platforms to connect whistleblowers, journalists, and activists safely across borders. These platforms enabled sharing of sensitive information, coordinated responses, and mutual protection. Through this network, Jessica connected with Lena, a food scientist from Spain, who had uncovered similar manipulation schemes linked to biotech firms operating in Europe. Their collaboration underscored the global nature of the issue and strengthened international calls for cooperation. However, forming alliances wasn't without challenges. Different groups had varying priorities and strategies. Some advocated for radical disruption of the food industry, while others preferred incremental reform. Balancing these perspectives required negotiation and empathy. Jessica learned to navigate these tensions, often acting as a mediator, focusing on shared goals rather than differences. Meanwhile, new threats emerged. As the web of alliances grew, so did attempts by opposing forces to infiltrate and undermine efforts. False information campaigns, cyber attacks on coalition networks, and intimidation of key figures tested the movement's resilience. Jessica's team implemented stringent security protocols and fostered a culture of vigilance and transparency. At times, the pressure felt overwhelming. Yet, moments of solidarity kept the fire alive. At a large gathering of advocates and industry reformers in Chicago, Jessica delivered a speech that captured the spirit of the movement. This fight is bigger than any one of us. It's about reclaiming trust, dignity, and the right to choose what we eat without fear or manipulation. Together, we're rewriting the story of food, power, and justice. The event sparked new energy and broadened the coalition's reach. Marcus announced a series of pop-up restaurants committed to transparency and ethical sourcing, proving that delicious, honest food could thrive outside the shadow empire. Meanwhile, Ava, though still cautious about public exposure, agreed to provide technical workshops for activists on security and infiltration tactics. Her expertise became invaluable for protecting the coalition's operations. Jessica's personal life, though still complicated, saw glimmers of hope. She began rebuilding connections with family and close friends, allowing herself moments of rest and normalcy. Darren's support remained steady, their partnership evolving into a deep bond forged in shared struggle. As the movement gained traction, Jessica realized the power of new alliances not just to challenge entrenched systems but to envision alternatives. Together, they dreamed of a food landscape where transparency, health, and respect for human dignity would guide innovation and commerce. Yet, Jessica remained vigilant. The Shadow Empire had shown its capacity to adapt and resist. The path ahead would be long and fraught with obstacles. But armed with new alliances, unwavering resolve, and growing public awareness, Jessica felt ready to face whatever came next. The crossroads had been crossed. A new chapter in the fight had begun. Jessica's resolve had carried her through countless battles, but nothing prepared her for the breaking point she was about to face. The cumulative weight of public pressure, personal sacrifices, and unrelenting threats had begun to erode her strength. Each day brought new challenges, legal battles, security concerns, media storms, and the fight seemed endless. The movement she helped ignite was growing, but so was the opposition. The corporate forces behind Radiant Harvest and its affiliates had regrouped, adopting more covert tactics to evade scrutiny. Their influence seeped into political circles, media outlets, and digital platforms. Jessica found herself targeted by sophisticated disinformation campaigns designed to undermine her credibility and isolate her from allies. One morning, after a sleepless night, Jessica woke to find her email flooded with anonymous messages, some filled with hate, others with veiled threats. The harassment wasn't limited to her online presence. Suspicious individuals appeared near her home, and strange calls disrupted her peace. Darren urged her to increase security, but the psychological toll was mounting. Jessica felt exhausted, vulnerable, and increasingly paranoid. At work, the pressure was no less intense. Congressional hearings dragged on, with representatives questioning her motives and demanding proof of every claim. Some allies began to doubt whether the fight was worth the personal cost. Even Marcus Hayes, usually a source of inspiration, expressed concern about Jessica's well-being during a private meeting. "You can't pour from an empty cup," he said. "We need you, but we also need you healthy." Despite their words, Jessica struggled to slow down. The stakes felt too high. The vault revelations had only scratched the surface. New leads suggested the manipulation extended deeper and was embedded in everyday food supply chains nationwide. As she chased these leads, Jessica's health declined. She began experiencing panic attacks, moments where the walls seemed to close in, and breathing became difficult. One evening, while reviewing documents, she collapsed, overwhelmed by anxiety and exhaustion. That night, Amy arrived unexpectedly, insisting Jessica take a break and come home. Reluctantly, Jessica agreed. The change of environment was initially jarring, but Amy's calm presence provided a balm. Jessica opened up about her fears, the relentless pressure, and the loneliness she felt despite the movement around her. Amy reminded her of the importance of self-care and that stepping back wasn't failure but a necessary act of preservation. During her time away from the front lines, Jessica reflected deeply. She recognized that the fight wasn't just external but internal as well. She needed to rebuild not only her physical health but also her emotional resilience. Therapy sessions helped her develop coping strategies, and reconnecting with family reminded her of the life she was fighting to protect. Meanwhile, Darren and the coalition continued advancing the cause, respecting Jessica's need for space but keeping her informed. When she returned, Jessica brought with her renewed clarity and a new approach. She began delegating more responsibilities, trusting her team and allies to carry the torch. This shift allowed her to focus on strategic efforts and maintain balance. However, the Shadow Empire's reach was relentless. In a devastating blow, Ava's location was compromised, forcing her into hiding once more. The loss of Ava's direct support was a sharp reminder of the danger facing all involved. Yet, it also galvanized the coalition to strengthen security and solidarity. The breaking point had tested Jessica's limits but also revealed the power of community and self-compassion. She realized that enduring the fight required not only courage but also wisdom to know when to rest and regroup. With this renewed perspective, Jessica stepped forward, ready to lead not just with fire but with steady resolve. The battle was far from over, but she had crossed a new threshold. One where strength was measured not only by endurance but by balance and care. The battle that had seemed endless was finally showing signs of change. Jessica, fortified by a renewed sense of balance and resilience, began to witness the turning tides of a movement she had helped ignite. The public's appetite for truth and transparency grew stronger every day, fueled by the relentless advocacy of activists, journalists, and whistleblowers who refused to be silenced. After months of exhaustive hearings, the Food Integrity Act moved closer to becoming law. Senator Claire Donovan, backed by growing bipartisan support, navigated the treacherous waters of political opposition with skill and determination. The bill promised sweeping reforms, mandatory disclosure of all ingredients, strict oversight of food science research, and harsher penalties for deceptive marketing and psychological manipulation. The bill's momentum signaled a victory not only for Jessica and her allies but also for millions of consumers demanding accountability. Outside the halls of power, the culinary world underwent a transformation. Marcus Hayes's pop-up restaurants became flagship examples of ethical gastronomy, inspiring others to follow suit. These establishments rejected the synthetic additives and emotional manipulation tactics once common, instead emphasizing locally sourced, organic ingredients prepared with integrity and care. The movement sparked a resurgence of community-focused food initiatives, farmers' markets flourished, cooperative kitchens emerged, and educational programs on nutrition and food ethics gained traction in schools and public forums. Darren's encrypted platform had evolved into a global hub for whistleblowers and advocates, facilitating international cooperation that exposed similar manipulation networks abroad. The coalition's reach extended beyond the United States, pressuring governments worldwide to enact protective regulations and increase oversight. Yet the shadow empire was not defeated. As reforms advanced, some corporations shifted tactics, investing in covert influence campaigns and technological innovation to evade new laws. Jessica and her allies remained vigilant, developing new strategies to counter these moves. One breakthrough came when Ava, from a secure location overseas, hacked into a shadowy data broker specializing in selling personal information harvested through manipulated dining experiences. The data broker's files revealed extensive networks of surveillance and psychological profiling tied to the food manipulation schemes. This revelation highlighted the extent to which personal data had been weaponized alongside food itself, raising urgent questions about privacy and consent. The coalition quickly incorporated data privacy into its advocacy platform, pushing for stronger protections and transparency in digital marketing practices. Meanwhile, Jessica found strength in the community that had formed around the movement. She regularly engaged with survivors of the manipulation campaigns, people who had felt their emotions controlled or decisions influenced through food. Their stories underscored the human cost behind the corporate strategies and fueled Jessica's determination to keep pushing forward. In the midst of this progress, Jessica and Darren's partnership deepened into something more profound. Shared hardships and victories forged a bond built on trust, respect, and mutual support. Their relationship became a source of stability and hope amid the ongoing storm. Public sentiment shifted noticeably. Media coverage grew more favorable, spotlighting the human stories behind the headlines and celebrating the small victories won by consumers and advocates. Restaurants once complicit in the manipulation began rebranding themselves as transparent and ethical, recognizing that consumer trust was paramount. However, Jessica knew complacency was dangerous. The battle for control over food, health, and privacy was ongoing and evolving. The coalition prioritized education and empowerment, ensuring people understood their rights and the risks posed by unchecked corporate power. Jessica's role as a leader transformed from frontline exposer to strategic coordinator, mentor, and symbol of resilience. She traveled widely, speaking at conferences, universities, and community centers, inspiring a new generation of activists. One of the most pivotal moments came when a global summit on food ethics was convened, bringing together policymakers, scientists, chefs, and advocates from around the world. Jessica was invited to deliver the keynote address, a testament to her impact. Standing before a diverse audience, she spoke not just of the battles fought but of the vision ahead, a world where food nourished body and soul without manipulation or deceit, where transparency and respect were the foundations of every plate served. As the summit closed, new international agreements were forged, signaling unprecedented cooperation to regulate food technology, marketing, and data privacy on a global scale. The turning tides were undeniable. Yet, Jessica remained humble, aware that every gain was hard-won and could be reversed without vigilance. She continued to encourage the coalition and public to stay engaged, to question, and to demand accountability. In quieter moments, Jessica reflected on how far she had come, from the initial shock of uncovering the vault to leading a worldwide movement. The journey had tested her in every way imaginable but had also revealed the power of courage, truth, and community. The tides had turned, yes, but the ocean was vast. The fight to reclaim food's true purpose was far from over. But Jessica faced the future with a heart fortified by hope and a spirit ready to keep steering toward justice. Just as the movement seemed to be gaining unstoppable momentum, shadows from the past began to resurface, threatening to unravel the progress made. Jessica had believed that with the Food Integrity Act advancing and public awareness at an all-time high, the worst was behind them. But power rarely relinquishes control without a fight. The shadow empire behind Radiant Harvest and its affiliates had not vanished. Instead, they retreated temporarily, recalibrating strategies, gathering new resources, and exploiting vulnerabilities in the rapidly evolving landscape. Jessica first sensed the shift when subtle signs appeared, whispers in the media casting doubt on the coalition's motives, leaked documents suggesting internal corruption within advocacy groups, and mysterious delays in regulatory enforcement. These signs escalated quickly. A respected member of the coalition was exposed in a scandal involving misuse of funds. The revelation shook trust within the movement and provided critics with ammunition to question its legitimacy. Simultaneously, Jessica received anonymous warnings. The shadow empire had infiltrated deeper than anyone suspected, leveraging insiders in government and industry to sabotage reform efforts from within. Cyber attacks on coalition servers intensified, targeting communication platforms, financial records, and personal information of key members. Darren's team scrambled to reinforce digital defenses, but breaches occasionally slipped through, exposing sensitive data and threatening operational security. More troubling were the legal battles launched by corporations aiming to stall or repeal new regulations. These suits claimed the Food Integrity Act violated free market principles and stifled innovation, resonating with a segment of the public weary of government intervention. Lobbyists flooded lawmakers with campaign donations, pressuring them to withdraw support. Jessica's testimony, once widely respected, faced growing skepticism. Media outlets sympathetic to corporate interests amplified dissenting voices, framing the coalition as radicals disrupting a prosperous industry. Within the movement, tensions grew. Some advocates urged more aggressive tactics, public protests, civil disobedience, and whistleblower campaigns, while others pushed for patience and diplomacy. Jessica found herself mediating these internal conflicts, striving to maintain unity despite mounting pressure. The personal toll deepened. The constant attacks and betrayals wore on her mental health. Paranoia crept back, and sleep became elusive. Even Darren struggled to shield her from the relentless storm. The breaking point felt imminent. Yet, amid the darkness, new sources of light emerged. Unexpected allies stepped forward. A group of young legislators, inspired by Jessica's vision, formed a bipartisan caucus dedicated to transparency and consumer protection. They worked quietly but effectively to counter lobbying influence and push reform through procedural hurdles. Internationally, Lena and other scientists coordinated with watchdog organizations to expose emerging biotech schemes designed to bypass regulations. Ava, having regained some footing, developed advanced encryption tools that fortified coalition communications, enabling safer collaboration. Jessica also reconnected with Marcus Hayes, whose restaurants had become centers for grassroots education and activism. These spaces provided safe havens where community members could share experiences, learn about food ethics, and organize collective action. This renewed solidarity helped Jessica find strength. She realized that the battle was no longer just about exposing a conspiracy but about sustaining a movement capable of enduring setbacks and evolving. She began focusing on building resilience within the coalition, fostering transparency, and empowering local leaders to take initiative. One critical breakthrough came when investigative journalists uncovered evidence of bribery involving high-ranking officials blocking enforcement of the new laws. The revelation sparked public outrage and led to official probes, weakening the Shadow Empire's grip on government. Jessica's faith in justice was rekindled. Still, she understood that vigilance was essential. The shadows would always resurface as long as unchecked power existed. The key was to create structures and communities strong enough to withstand those incursions. As the movement adapted, Jessica embraced a new role, not only as an exposer of corruption but as a mentor, strategist, and beacon of hope for those fighting similar battles worldwide. The fight had changed, becoming more complex and demanding greater patience and unity. In reflecting on this phase, Jessica acknowledged that progress was rarely linear. It was a series of advances and retreats, breakthroughs and setbacks. What mattered was the unwavering commitment to truth and justice. The shadows had resurfaced, but so had the light. And in that balance, Jessica found renewed purpose to keep pushing forward. Just when Jessica thought she had seen every twist the fight could throw at her, unexpected revelations emerged that shifted everything once again. The data breaches and political setbacks had revealed cracks in the coalition, but now new information exposed an even deeper level of manipulation, one that challenged not only the Shadow Empire's control over the food industry but the very nature of trust and loyalty within Jessica's inner circle. It began with a tip from an anonymous source, delivered through the coalition's encrypted network. The message was cryptic but urgent: look closer at those closest to you. At first, Jessica hesitated to believe such insinuations. Years of battling deception had taught her caution, but also the danger of paranoia. Still, the source provided a lead: a series of financial transactions involving a trusted member of the coalition, suspiciously linked to offshore accounts and shell companies connected to Radiant Harvest. Jessica's heart sank. Could betrayal be lurking within her ranks? She convened a confidential meeting with her closest advisors, including Darren and Ava, to review the evidence. As they dug deeper, they discovered subtle patterns: communications deleted from servers, unexplained absences during critical operations, and discrepancies in reports. The signs pointed to someone feeding information to the opposition, sabotaging efforts from within. The revelation struck hard. Jessica felt a mixture of shock, hurt, and determination. The betrayal threatened not only the coalition's mission but the fragile trust that held the movement together. They had always known the enemy could be anywhere, but the reality was brutal. The coalition initiated a careful internal investigation, balancing the need for secrecy with fairness. Paranoia loomed, but Jessica insisted on a process rooted in transparency and respect for due process. Meanwhile, the external battle continued. Opponents seized on the internal turmoil, framing the coalition as fractured and unreliable. Media outlets hostile to the movement amplified these narratives, further complicating efforts to maintain public support. Yet, in the midst of this crisis, another unexpected revelation brought a glimmer of hope. Ava uncovered a trove of encrypted files hidden within the Shadow Empire's data archives, revealing the identities of several previously unknown collaborators, scientists, politicians, and corporate executives, who had secretly opposed the manipulation schemes and worked covertly to undermine them. These allies had been operating underground for years, constrained by fear and risk. The discovery opened new channels of cooperation and provided fresh momentum to the movement. Jessica reached out to these hidden allies, forging new partnerships that brought valuable intelligence and resources. One of these unexpected collaborators was Dr. Elena Morales, a former food technologist turned whistleblower who had left the industry disillusioned by unethical practices. Her knowledge of biochemical manipulation techniques and insider perspective became a crucial asset. As Jessica integrated these new allies, she also confronted the personal toll of betrayal within her circle. The member implicated in sabotage was confronted, leading to a painful but necessary separation. The process was difficult, exposing vulnerabilities but also reinforcing the coalition's commitment to integrity. This chapter in the fight underscored the complexity of human nature, how fear, pressure, and conflicting loyalties could challenge even the most dedicated. Yet, it also highlighted resilience, forgiveness, and the power of shared purpose to heal divisions. Jessica emerged from this trial with renewed clarity. The fight was no longer just about external forces but about cultivating a culture of trust, openness, and accountability within the movement. As new alliances formed and old wounds began to heal, the coalition prepared for the next phase. With the Shadow Empire weakened but still dangerous, and with the movement more united and informed, Jessica felt the tide shifting once more. The unexpected revelations had tested them, but they had also strengthened the foundation for future victories. In the quiet moments that followed, Jessica reflected on the journey, how every twist had shaped her, the movement, and the vision of a world where food was a source of health and happiness, not manipulation and control. The revelations had been painful, but necessary, revealing the true cost and value of trust. And with that knowledge, Jessica stepped forward, ready to face whatever lay ahead with courage and hope. The moment had arrived for the coalition to rally its forces and push back with renewed strength. After enduring betrayals, setbacks, and constant shadow attacks, Jessica knew that the resistance needed a powerful unifying call. The public was hungry for change, but fatigue and cynicism threatened to dull their resolve. Jessica and her team strategized tirelessly to create a campaign that would reignite passion and engagement across communities nationwide. The plan was ambitious, combining grassroots activism, digital mobilization, and alliances with influential cultural figures. The goal was clear: to expose the lingering corruption within the food industry and pressure lawmakers to enforce the new regulations fully and transparently. Jessica spearheaded the initiative, leveraging her growing public platform. She traveled extensively, visiting towns and cities where the coalition's message had taken root but where enthusiasm needed rekindling. At each stop, she listened deeply to personal stories: farmers who struggled against monopolized seed markets, families affected by mysterious health problems linked to processed foods, local activists fighting misinformation. These encounters fueled her speeches and shaped the campaign's messaging, grounding it in lived experiences and real hope. Darren worked behind the scenes, expanding the coalition's digital infrastructure. New apps and secure communication channels made it easier for supporters to organize local events, share verified information, and report suspicious activities related to food manipulation. Ava coordinated with cybersecurity experts to safeguard these platforms against cyber attacks and surveillance. Meanwhile, Marcus Hayes contributed by hosting community dinners and workshops in his restaurants, creating welcoming spaces for dialogue and education. His chefs prepared meals that highlighted transparency, health, and the joy of authentic flavors. These events became gathering points for allies, bridging cultural and socio-economic divides. The media strategy was equally robust. Jessica granted exclusive interviews to independent journalists and podcasters who were sympathetic to the cause, ensuring that the coalition's message reached diverse audiences. Viral social media campaigns featured testimonials, infographics, and calls to action, designed to be shareable and emotionally compelling. The phrase, "Food Freedom Now," became a rallying cry, capturing the movement's urgency and aspiration. Political advocacy intensified as well. The bipartisan caucus of legislators, energized by public pressure, introduced new bills aimed at closing loopholes and enhancing enforcement mechanisms. Jessica testified before congressional committees with renewed confidence, armed with fresh evidence uncovered by coalition investigators and whistleblowers. The opposition fought back fiercely, but the tide of public opinion was shifting. At the grassroots level, local chapters of the coalition mobilized protests, letter-writing campaigns, and voter registration drives. Communities that had once felt powerless now felt empowered to demand transparency and accountability. The energy was palpable, crossing generational and geographical boundaries. Throughout this period, Jessica found solace and strength in her personal relationships. Darren remained a steady partner, providing emotional support and strategic insight. Amy's unwavering friendship offered grounding and moments of respite. Even Ava, still cautious due to ongoing threats, celebrated the movement's victories from afar, a reminder that no one fought alone. The coalition's efforts culminated in a nationwide Day of Truth event, coordinated to coincide with a critical vote on reinforcing the Food Integrity Act. Thousands gathered in public squares, parks, and civic centers, waving signs and sharing stories. The event captured widespread media attention, illustrating the movement's breadth and depth. The vote itself was a nail-biter, with intense lobbying and political maneuvering behind closed doors. When the final tally was announced, the strengthened legislation passed by a narrow but decisive margin. The victory was celebrated as a testament to the power of collective action and perseverance. However, Jessica remained mindful that the fight was ongoing. New challenges awaited, technological innovations by corporate interests, shifting political landscapes, and the constant need to engage and educate the public. Yet, the rallying of the resistance had proven that unity, courage, and hope could overcome even the darkest attempts at control. As Jessica stood before a crowd during the Day of Truth, looking out at faces filled with determination and hope, she felt the profound truth of their journey, that real change was born not from a single act, but from the relentless, shared struggle to reclaim justice and dignity. The resistance was alive, stronger than ever, ready to face whatever shadows might come next. After months of mounting pressure, covert sabotage, and relentless public activism, Jessica and the coalition were preparing for what they knew would be the defining battle in their fight against the Shadow Empire. The fight was no longer about exposing hidden secrets, it was about dismantling a deeply entrenched system of control before it could regain power and erase the gains won through sacrifice and courage. Intelligence gathered by Ava and Darren indicated that Radiant Harvest and its allies were planning a last-ditch effort to regain influence, a coordinated campaign combining aggressive lobbying, media manipulation, and cutting-edge food technology designed to confuse and subdue public opinion. The corporation's goal was clear: to cripple the coalition's credibility and rewrite the narrative before new laws could be fully implemented. Jessica understood that winning this confrontation would require flawless coordination, unwavering unity, and strategic brilliance. She convened her inner circle in a secure location, laying out a plan that involved simultaneous actions on multiple fronts: legal challenges to anticipate corporate lawsuits, media campaigns to preempt misinformation, grassroots mobilization to maintain public engagement, and cybersecurity operations to protect their networks from infiltration. The coalition had learned hard lessons about vulnerability, and this time they intended to be several steps ahead. In the weeks leading up to the showdown, tension ran high. The coalition's members worked around the clock, balancing exhaustion with fierce determination. Jessica's role evolved into that of a commander, balancing strategic oversight with moments of personal connection to keep morale high. The public sensed the urgency. News outlets began reporting on the escalating conflict, framing it as a struggle between corporate greed and consumer rights. Support poured in from unexpected corners: celebrities, religious leaders, scientists, and even former industry insiders who had turned whistleblowers. The coalition's narrative was one of transparency, health, and empowerment, resonating deeply in a world increasingly wary of deception. When the day of the final confrontation arrived, the coalition launched a synchronized campaign. Legal teams filed injunctions to block manipulative product launches, while media teams released exposés timed to coincide with corporate press releases. Social media buzzed with calls to action, live-streamed rallies, and testimonies from people whose lives had been impacted by food manipulation. On the ground, local chapters organized peaceful demonstrations and educational events, reinforcing the message that this fight belonged to everyone. In the midst of this chaos, Jessica delivered a powerful speech broadcast live nationwide. She spoke not only of the dangers posed by unchecked corporate power but of the collective strength found in community and truth. Her words inspired millions, reminding them that the right to safe, honest food was fundamental to freedom and dignity. Behind the scenes, Ava and Darren coordinated digital defenses, thwarting attempts to hack coalition servers and safeguard whistleblower identities. Their efforts ensured that vital information remained secure and accessible. The Shadow Empire's response was fierce but disjointed. Internal fractures appeared as some corporate executives balked at the escalating conflict and potential legal repercussions. Whistleblowers inside the corporation leaked critical documents revealing the extent of unethical practices, further eroding public trust. After days of relentless pressure, government agencies announced investigations into Radiant Harvest's practices. The pressure forced the corporation to retreat, publicly conceding to demands for transparency and reform. The victory was not total, but it marked a turning point. Jessica and her coalition had demonstrated that even the most powerful interests could be challenged when people united in purpose and truth. The final confrontation left scars, personal and collective, but also a legacy of resilience and hope. In the aftermath, Jessica reflected on the journey from a shocked whistleblower to a leader of a global movement. The fight had tested every facet of her being but had also revealed the profound impact of courage, community, and unwavering commitment. As she looked toward the future, Jessica knew that vigilance would remain essential, but the tide had turned decisively toward justice. The final confrontation had affirmed a fundamental truth, that food, health, and trust were sacred rights worth defending with every ounce of strength. With the final confrontation behind her and the coalition victorious in a battle that once seemed impossible, Jessica allowed herself a rare moment of calm to reflect on the journey that had reshaped not only her life but the lives of countless others. The movement had transitioned from a scattered group of whistleblowers and advocates to a formidable force capable of changing laws, exposing corruption, and inspiring a global dialogue about food ethics. Yet, with victory came the realization that the fight was never truly over. As Jessica stood on the steps of the Capitol building during the official signing of the Enhanced Food Integrity Act, she was overwhelmed by the weight of what had been accomplished. The law was a beacon of hope, promising greater transparency, stricter enforcement, and a renewed commitment to consumer rights. But more importantly, it symbolized a shift in societal values, a collective decision that food was not merely a commodity, but a sacred foundation of health, trust, and community. In the months that followed, Jessica focused on healing and rebuilding. The personal toll of the battle had been immense. Years of stress, betrayal, and sacrifice had left deep emotional scars. Therapy, reconnecting with family, and moments of quiet reflection helped her process the trauma and rediscover joy. Her relationships deepened, especially with Darren and Amy, who stood steadfastly by her side through every trial. Jessica also embraced a new role as a mentor and educator, sharing her story and lessons learned with emerging activists around the world. She traveled to universities, community centers, and international forums, emphasizing the power of resilience, integrity, and collective action. She advocated for continued vigilance, reminding audiences that systems of control adapt, and it is the responsibility of each generation to safeguard the hard-won gains of the past. The coalition itself evolved into a sustainable network of local leaders, scientists, legal experts, and educators. This decentralized model ensured that the movement was not reliant on any single person but empowered communities to take ownership of their food systems. Initiatives blossomed to support sustainable farming, ethical innovation, and public education, reflecting a holistic vision of food justice. A poignant moment came when Jessica visited a small town where the movement had first taken hold. Meeting families whose lives had improved thanks to better food policies and increased awareness, she saw the tangible impact of her work. Children played in community gardens, farmers shared knowledge, and local markets thrived with fresh, honest produce. The journey had come full circle. Yet, Jessica never forgot the shadows she had faced, those moments of doubt, betrayal, and danger. They became reminders of the fragile nature of progress and the importance of compassion and accountability within movements. She understood that true leadership meant embracing imperfection, learning from mistakes, and fostering trust. In her quiet moments, Jessica often reflected on a phrase that had guided her from the beginning: life is full of surprises, but love will always lead the way. This truth had carried her through the darkest nights and brightest days. Love for family, community, and the truth had been the compass steering her through complexity and conflict. As the sun set on this chapter of her life, Jessica felt a profound sense of gratitude, for the allies who had stood with her, the lessons learned, and the future yet unwritten. The story of the food fight was not just about exposure and resistance but about hope, transformation, and the enduring human spirit. It was a testament to the power of one woman's courage to ignite change, inspiring countless others to believe in a better, more just world. And with that belief, the journey would continue, always forward, always together. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?